Hey there, this is Tyler Korn from Impact Charlotte. Today we're continuing with this new collaborative podcast series where we take a deep look at all the things people are saying about God, Jesus, and Christianity. We know that the specific views that people have usually end up looking different from reality or from the truth. This confusion just grows and grows, and a lot of what people think and what they say moves further and further from the truth. Me and my friends Chris Barron and Scott Johnson are going to continue down the road today by talking about the confusion of who Jesus was. Did he actually claim to be the Anointed One? If so, what kind of king would he be? Welcome back. This is So They Say. There's no shortage of opinions of who Jesus really was, but there aren't many who deny that he existed and was a real person. The debate pretty much centers around who he was. Was he just a good man, just a teacher, maybe a prophet, or maybe he actually was the chosen one of God? What do people say about Jesus? Hey guys.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, everybody. Of course, it's probably not morning to you, but it's kind of morning to us.
It's definitely still the morning.
We all had our cinnamon rolls except for Tyler because he's watching his weight.
It's because he has an 8K in 2 weeks.
What do you weigh
So
again,
he's trying to
Tyler?
be-
What's your
Should we
ultimate
start
goal
over?
to get to? 112?
This is
So
what we're
this
waiting
episode,
for.
yeah. So we're just going to talk about me
Um,
and my physical goals.
well, we can talk about it for a little bit.
No, we don't have to.
No. Okay. Yeah. So how's everybody doing?
It's the morning.
Okay.
So,
It's almost Christmas.
It's a good day to be here in the Rheology Studios, though, in
Massive
sunny
studios.
Burbank, California.
It was a headache getting past security.
Was it? Your
Yeah.
credentials didn't get you right in the door?
You had to renew them.
They were revoked.
Yeah.
That's a good question you asked.
Which
About
one?
About what people think about Jesus.
Yeah. I didn't come up with it though.
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked it though. You said it. You asked it so eloquently. So,
Who's going to go first?
Chris said he's got something, so
Yeah,
I'm
so
gonna let him go
I-
before he forgets.
I
Something
immediately
juicy.
thought of like two buckets of people, right? So there's people in the church world and people outside of the church world, right? And I think I came up with those buckets because I think there's like this church answer, right? Which doesn't always mean it's the right answer, like the last, everything we've been talking about so
The
far.
Sunday school answer.
Yeah, the Sunday school answer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Where I think a person, maybe I'm gonna not to call out 17-year-olds, but a 17-year-old growing up the church, right, would probably answer Jesus. In my opinion, right, a lot of times it'd be, well, he was the Son of God, and the idea that, well, he wasn't the Father,
Right.
he wasn't God the Father.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, God the Father is just like setting up the rules and making sure you follow them. But Jesus, a lot of times, was just like, often like Tyler said, you see him as like the judge. I almost see Jesus as like the lawyer on your side and God the Father as the
Okay.
judge. And Jesus like, no. I'll kind of protect you. I'll show you how to do this.
Mhm.
And a lot of times Jesus is the good cop. And Jesus is like the buddy. I think a lot of times people in the church sees that, but also just like the Son. I think a lot of people, who is Jesus? And he was the Son of God, right? And there's like,
That's kind of like the patent answer,
Right.
basically.
Yeah. But then outside the church world, I think a lot of people would just say, right, I don't know, was it really, I'm thinking about people who are not super familiar with Christianity, right? Because Jesus is pretty common, Christianity is pretty common in America. So people would probably categorize him, well, I've heard him as just like I don't know if there's a better way to say he's a good teacher, but I think people don't have a problem with Jesus and his teachings, right? He was not super problematic, even in this. Well, besides his claims to be God,
Right.
Yeah.
those are
That's the
probably
big
pretty
one.
problematic.
Well, I mean,
but
like he's a rebel, but he's
Yeah.
not that kind of rebel.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
He's not like the one that stirs up trouble in the wrong way.
right,
He stirs up trouble in the right way. So therefore, he's not necessarily. He's not the bad guy.
right.
Let's go back to like the Christian view. Let's do that first,
Sure.
because like there's a lot there
Yes.
before we go to the non-Christian view. Saying the Son of God is interesting because it's like it is such a Sunday school answer because it doesn't really mean anything.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
we're all sons of God, technically, biblically, right? And Jesus is then claimed to be referred to as the Son of God,
Right.
but that doesn't really like give him like a specific title, or doesn't really say much about who he, what his demeanor is,
Mhm.
what he's supposed to do. So, like right off the bat, my thought is like that is a really good, poster of what Christians think of Jesus, the Son of God.
Yes.
And they also think that, and I think with that, it's like he's the sacrificial lamb,
Yes.
right? That's another, you guys said that too, like a couple episodes ago.
Mhm.
I like people talking about like what Christian kids would say the patent answer.
Yeah.
That would be a patent answer, which we don't really know exactly what that means either. So like my first thought was like, what does that mean? The Son of God in a Christian's mind, if it goes very far, it may not go very far. I don't know. But to me, it's like, what would that mean then? I do agree with you that ultimately I think that they think of him as like the advocate. I mean, he is kind of the advocate. I mean,
Yes.
Paul kind of says
Yes.
that he is.
Yes.
He goes to the Father on our behalf. But as far as like just being the Son of God, he's just the good guy,
Yes.
and he died
yes.
and rose again.
Right. I mean, it's all right, because I think that what we're talking about is we're addressing people who are just coming up with like the Christian means, right? So they're just, it's repeated language. But I mean, I don't know how far into this way to go, but like there's so much implications of being the Son of God and why there was a Son of God. Yeah, that's right, the title. But like for them, I think it was just like, that's just who he was, right? God had a
Right.
son, I guess, and it was Jesus. And he loved us so much that
Yeah.
he had to die for us on the cross for our sins,
Right.
right? And if we believe that, we get to go to heaven. But like that doesn't mean
Right.
who he was or what he was about. I think I don't think people know. Yeah, I don't. It's just hard to what people actually, who they think
Well,
Jesus
It's
was.
probably because it doesn't go very far.
That's what I'm saying, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
it's this half baked idea of we can just give it a title, and
Right.
it just not even description,
Exactly.
just a title.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
just know that like God is a CEO. But what does it mean for God to be the CEO?
Right.
Right.
That already is.
We're
much,
just
yeah.
taught labels and titles. But
Right.
There's no depth
Yes.
Yeah.
of understanding what
Yes.
the implications
Yes.
of Jesus and God and the Spirit being these things.
Yeah.
I mean, yes. Yeah, because their understanding of God is pretty small.
Mhm.
And then therefore if Jesus is the Son of God, then that understanding is even smaller.
Yeah.
Because they don't really understand God's role or how he came to be or where he came from, why he chose the Jews, what the Old Testament's about, blah, 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 blah. And then we have the Son of God. Cool. It sounds great. It sounds wonderful that somehow, like you said, Chris, somehow he's got a son and he sent him here
Yeah.
and he
Yes.
died. He was a really nice guy.
Yeah.
We were talking about this before this whole thing started, and we were talking about how like systematic theology teaches that Jesus was the claim anyway is that Jesus is fully human. He's a fully human being, just like me and you. But he's also fully divine. So he's literally a creature that is of both worlds. He's both of heaven, God's realm, the divine, and he's both of earth, our realm, human realm. To me, I don't feel like, in the Christian view, that would be like, okay, cool, fine. I guess he's both.
Right.
Now it could be, as we were talking about earlier too, it could be like a mixture of both, right? It could be like,
Yes.
oh, he's absolutely 100% divine, but he's probably more like 35% human
Yes.
because he was, I mean, come on, he didn't sin.
Mhm.
Right.
He was perfect.
He's perfect and he did all the right things. And, he's such a good guy. He died. I can't give him 100%, humanity. So you have like an extreme. So that's kind of like, I would guess that is like the nutshell of Christians' thoughts.
Yes.
Typical.
Sure.
I mean, we're going to say
Yes.
typical Christian thought
Yes.
is that.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a typical non-Christian thought though to that. I don't, because there's no Sunday school answer because they didn't go to Sunday
Yes.
school. Or if
Yes.
they did go to Sunday school, they didn't
I think that's
remember
where it gets
anything.
harder, right? It depends
Yes.
on
Well,
your...
but it is in culture, though, right?
But Jesus is in culture.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not
Yes,
like they
yes.
don't know anything.
Yes.
And like they're not being taught anything.
No,
Yes.
I'm just saying that there's no like patent idea. Like we could literally say for Christianity, the vast majority of Christians' views of Jesus would be what we just said, right?
Yes. Yeah,
but
yeah.
but non-Christian, it's all over the place. Not that he's not a part of culture, people don't know him, but it could be like, hey, yeah, I think he was definitely fully human, but I don't think he's
Right.
divine at all.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no
Right.
divine.
Right.
He's just a good guy. He was a priest or whatever you want to call him, maybe a messenger from God. But then again, maybe he was, 100% divine and maybe 20% human. Maybe he was sent from heaven as like an angel almost, right?
Mhm.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right.
Mhm.
So then
see what you're
it
saying. Okay.
keeps going from there, where it's less divine and more human, or more human, less divine. There's more degrees of it. Versus Christians, I would say, like what Chris is saying, like that's the majority of the view,
Right.
that he is 100% divine and 100% human, or 100% divine and not completely 100% human, even though
Yeah.
he died for my sins and he's the Lamb of God and he was sacrificed and Son of God and all that. So like I've heard people talk about Jesus being a con artist
Mm-hmm.
before,
Mhm.
like that. It's like there's some of these crazy. Sorry if you're a crazy conspiracy theorist person out there. I don't mean to call you crazy, but you are. Especially if you think that like, what if Jesus was just like one of the greatest con artists
Right.
to ever
Yeah.
be on the planet? I'm not sure what he'd be conning people into.
I that's one of my, like, this is not like a real doubt, but it comes across my mind more than anything else is like, and this is so far-fetched, right? But it's the idea of like, what if someone
You
went
may
back
be
in time?
crazy.
Right. This is like way crossing through the threshold of crazy.
Yeah.
Right. 'Cause
Okay.
This is like
Wow.
theoretical future science going back in time, and this person is just
Yeah.
tricking everyone
Okay.
for the point of tricking everyone.
It's like Loki.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Like Tyler knows.
Mhm.
But I think one of my doubts always come across my mind is, what if he was just like this magician, like a sleight of hand con
Yeah.
artist that was just like trying to build, because we hear this all the time back in those days, there were so many messiahs, right? There were so many sons of gods,
Mhm.
and maybe he was just like learning from the best, and for the point to just like have a following, because I don't know why cult leaders exist anyways, they just want power. But that's always one of
True.
my thoughts is, what if he was just really like, I don't know, because like technology back then was so small, he could just trick people.
Technology was small.
Whatever. I don't know how to say it. It
like
didn't
the
exist.
wheel.
Yeah.
I think well, that's why I said what I said. I kind of backed up my thoughts. Like, I'm not sure what he's tricking people into. What's he getting out of it?
Yeah.
I mean, he gets fame. That's great.
Yeah.
But he's telling everybody to give his fame away.
yes.
Yeah.
There's
Yes,
several
yes, yes.
moments where
Yes,
like
that's right.
everybody wants to crown him king. He could have been king. He could have been crowned king easily.
Right.
But all those moments he like sneaks out the back door. He had several moments to get out of the trial, especially with Pontius Pilate.
Right.
He had several opportunities to get out of it, and Pilate would have set him free. He didn't. So it's like the con artist kind of deal. It sounds like a great story. It
Yes,
sounds
this
like a
is-
cool
yes.
show that Netflix should make or
Yes.
something, but it's really, really, honestly, it's extremely far fetched. The other messiahs were typically exactly what you just said. They were absolutely out for popularity, but they also followed the thread of kind of what we've talked about and what we're going to talk about more. They followed the thread of like what a king should be,
Mhm.
and instead of what Jesus
Right.
claims a king, what kind of king he would be. And we're going to talk about that. So, in which the king that they thought they should be, the Messiah should be, always ended in conflict.
Yeah.
Always. It ended in conflict. It ended in revolt. You know, there was always going to be a physical fight, and Jesus was never looking for a physical fight ever. So that one's kind of interesting. It's interesting. It doesn't go very far. You're right. It's like Marty McFly trying to figure it out. But other than that, not really. We're going to talk a little bit about this. Like Jesus is just a teacher. He was called a rabbi,
right?
So why couldn't he just have been just a teacher, you know, and not really divine? Possible, a little more possible than, way more possible than a con artist.
Yes.
Really good guy. We talked about that, and I heard this one time that Jesus was an alien, and you think to yourself, what alien? What? But I mean, he's from a different world, technically, and Jesus, I guess, kind of was an alien if we think he was divine. But more just like an angel, like a mess. It's like one of the archangels, like Michael or something.
Right.
Like he was just an angel, and he was appointed, you know, anointed and appointed from all the other angels to just come down and be a messenger, basically, and a short-lived messenger, a temporary messenger, and whatever. So therefore, he kind of hit both realms, but not fully one or fully the other, or fully both. So I just think those are interesting things. I wrote this down because I think this really does happen a lot. Is that Christian or non-Christian, that we all make God in our own image, like we reverse that.
Yes.
Like what kind of God do we need? And I really feel like we do the exact same thing with Jesus.
Yes.
What are our needs? Oh, he's a healer. Well, it's probably because you need to be healed.
Yeah.
No, he's a man of sorrows. It's because you're going through some horrible crap and you need Jesus to be that with you. Blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on and on. And I think, I feel like that is probably more of the underlying like foundation of what people really kind of start to think about who Jesus is and what and why is probably more related to like their specific individual need.
Which it doesn't mean that he's not those things.
No.
Right?
Just that he's mainly those things.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that goes back to the concept of how we basically said that anyone can be Messiah people. It's just like, what Messiah are you belonging to, right? And I think that goes back to what you're saying is like, what kind of Jesus do you believe in, right? Because like then that becomes your whole identity, right? It has to be rooted somewhere. Otherwise, you're just making it up,
right?
I think this all goes back to like, can we be, I think Bible Project, again to reference them, be good tourists of the text, where the text comes from? Or are we just making things up because like this is what I really need, or this is the context I'm coming from, so this must be the Jesus,
right,
the real Jesus, because like that is how I see it in my context,
right.
And that becomes this like very limited or very like narrow and anorexic version of Jesus,
right?
Yeah.
I feel like if Jesus becomes this, it's almost like Jesus can be anything you need him to be.
Yes.
And so therefore, and that's not a horrible idea, but if you fixate on just what you need him to be, you're going to miss out on like the larger story.
Yeah.
Right. And really the purpose of who he is and why God made a son.
Yes.
Why he sent
because
a son.
it's all transactional.
Yes.
Right.
And you're the center, right? It's
Absolutely.
all for you.
Yeah.
Like Jesus, yes, whatever your needs are.
And at that point, he's no better than Bigfoot. He's just an imaginary
Yes.
He's just fulfilling
character in our
like
story.
You're really carrying Bigfoot.
He's a really
They'll follow
caring
you around
Bigfoot.
because you need him.
like a magical.
That's not as
magical. Yeah,
he's still ambiguous, but not
Yes.
as ambiguous as Bigfoot.
And you miss out on the whole point of Jesus.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like if I'm just trying to get things from Jesus, then I'm actually missing the whole point of him as a person and God.
Right. So we have kind of hinted on is like the only true way to really figure out, you know, who he is and what he was about is to obviously read, you know, just read. It's there. We can figure it out. And so I think this is interesting because, one of my favorite like foundational verses in the Bible is Matthew 16. And it's actually 16, 17, where we've talked about this for a long time. And if you're new to this podcast, you can actually go backwards into like the Reality Vault.
Do it.
And understand what makes reality. Reality is this little Greek word or phrase called ecclesia. And it's first found in Matthew 16, 17. But before that, Jesus is actually on his way to a certain region with his students. And he actually asks them the same question that we are actually saying. He says, what are people saying about me? Who do they think I am? Which I think is like awesome
Mm-hmm.
that Jesus is actually asking those people right then and there with him the same question that we're asking 2,000 years afterwards of who he is. So I wrote down a couple of notes because I think these are like incredibly fascinating. Number one, the text says that they are in this little area, in these villages around this area called Caesarea Philippi. Anytime you see Caesarea, we pronounce it Caesarea. It's probably should be pronounced Caesarea because it's in honor of Caesar.
There you go.
Boom. Now it wasn't always in honor of Caesar. It's got a rich history, but it was known. It's kind of ancient ruins at this point, but it was known that it was the potpourri of paganism, which basically means like there was all kinds of crazy worship stuff going on here. All the Baals, we know of like a god in the Old Testament called Baal. There's actually a couple different type like spawns of Baal. Sometime we're going to talk about Baal because it's crazy. Some of the history of Baal and who he was and what he meant. And we'll get into that some other time.
This is the teaser.
It's a teaser. But like you think of like the Old Testament, like the prophet Elijah, is going against the prophets of Baal.
Mm-hmm.
He's by himself, and there's like hundreds of prophets of Baal. Anyway, or like Baal, you see Baal all the time. What's Baal? We'll get into that some other time. But the spawns of Baal, they're all worshipped here. All kinds of different Greek and Roman gods are worshipped here. There's one main god, the god called Pan, who's like the half goat, half human dude, has a little pipe looking thing, fluty. He was worshipped there. Actually, there's a big cave that's like outside the city that human sacrifices were performed in this cave. They would throw humans into this cave to sacrifice to Pan because they believed that this cave was the gateway to the underground, and the underground had all kinds of gods. So the word that we have, it comes from the Greek and from the Hebrew, that we call Hades, is the underground. We also like to use another term, what we call hell, for the underground. This starts to like click with people. Oh, okay. Yeah. Hell, yeah. But the bad people go to hell. They go to the underground. That's supposed to be like where the bad gods are. Anyhow, so this cave was there, and they threw people into it. It's just a crazy, crazy, crazy area because there's all kinds of stuff going on. And so when Jesus is asking this question, like he's not like just like testing these guys. He's like super curious because he's like, I wonder what they think of me. What do these people think of me? And so then he asked them, what do people say? And of course, the answers, came about like some people say you're this, some people say you're that. And so then he asked the big question, which we talked about, who do you say that I am? And then Peter stands up and he says that Jesus is the capital M Messiah, the capital C Christ, whatever. And so Jesus then, right after that, this is a fun little fact that goes with this whole little Caesarea Philippi. He says that, I'll build my ecclesia built upon like what you just said, right? But he also says the gates of
Hades, hell.
The opening of the cave was referred to as the gates of Hades. It's the gateway to the underground.
Okay.
So Jesus even says, hey, this ecclesia, it's going to be built Not even the gates of Hades can prevail against it. Which basically, he's not basically saying, which is a little off topic, but a fun little key. A lot of people say like, "Oh, hell can't even get us." You know, we're Christians. Hell has no authority over us. Jesus said right there, the gates of hell. Can't thinking of the devil and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No. What Jesus is saying is like the power of the ecclesia going forth and doing what it's going to do, and which we all allude to and what we're going to talk about. Can't stand against this because this message is so powerful and so good that it'll break barriers, basically. Mm-hmm. That's basically what he's saying. So Jesus wants to know, what the heck are people thinking of me? And they say, so the question then, you know, I guess for me is really trying to understand, and, you know, if Jesus came, this is what I wrote down. If Jesus came as the capital A anointed one, as we talked about last time, the Messiah, the Meshiach, the King of all kings, the Lord of all lords, and he came as a king. The question really is, because that's really kind of what he's claiming here, right? He's claiming to be, you know, Meshiach and king, as we talked about. But specifically, as we also said about all the other messiahs, why would he be a different king from all the other messiahs? And how is his approach differently? So, like, for instance, I just put in here like Luke 5. You got Matthew, who is one of his disciples, and Matthew gets called by Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. And if you've seen The Chosen, you know that like Matthew's like, Lord, oh my gosh, why would you pick me? I'm despised. And they go to Matthew's house, and Matthew collects all of his tax collector friends together and says, hey, we're going to have a party. And this guy, Jesus, is coming. And they have a party. And some of the priests and the Pharisee guys are walking by, and they see this going on. They can't believe that this dude, this Jesus that everybody considers rabbi, is eating with these unclean people, these horrible people. And Jesus tells him, because they're even confused of like, who is Jesus? Mm-hmm. So we're going to go over a couple little scriptures here that talk about, so they say. Okay. This is so they say. So we're going to address this issue of like, well, some people think he was this, some people think he was that. We're going to actually look at Jesus's words. Just a quick thing here. I'm not going to go over it all, because anybody listening that really wants to know, you need to read the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Because Jesus is very clear about who he is and what he's not. So if you're thinking he's one thing, you might want to read and figure out he's actually a lot more than that. So Jesus tells these super religious people, he's like, no, I didn't come to call righteous people, good people, clean people. I came to be around the sinners. So there's one right there. I did not come to do this. So if you think that I came to be, you know, the advocate for all the Christians, no, I didn't. I didn't come to be the advocate for all the good people. I came to be an advocate for everybody, all the bad people. Luke 3, he's in the synagogue and he heals this dude in the synagogue. And, you know, in the synagogue, there's priests and stuff in there, and they all freak out. Oh my gosh, what are you doing? Why'd you do this on Saturday? It's a Sabbath. You're not supposed to do that on Sabbath. They thought Jesus was that guy. He was supposed to be, if you're supposed to be rabbi and maybe even Messiah, you're supposed to observe the laws. Yeah. That's what we're expecting you to be. And Jesus very simply says, I did not come to uphold all the Jewish laws. I came to do good. And then there's one of my favorites, Zacchaeus, the wee little man that we all get to sing about in Sunday school. He came to see Jesus, and Jesus says, yeah, man, get out of the tree. I'm going to your house today. He was a chief tax collector, which means he was really bad in the eyes of everybody. And surely Jesus didn't come for those guys. Wrong. He basically he got questioned again, and then he basically says, I came to seek and save the lost. So the New Testament is full of these kinds of situations where you've also you'll see and we have read situations where Jesus would even he would say it before, do like a little disclaimer before he would go on. And we've talked about it before. He would say things like, you've heard it said.
Right.
That basically is like a key phrase to you better listen up, because I'm going to tell you the way it's actually supposed to be. You've been taught this way forever and ever, but listen up, because what I'm going to say is I'm going to correct it. Mm-hmm. And so he just does that over and over and over. So for any of us to, be to the point where, we don't, there's a so you say kind of a moment where we think Jesus was this and we want him to be this and want to be that. The reality is he was very, very clear through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John about what kind of king he was supposed to be. We know that from last time, we know that he is Messiah, capital M, Meshiach, which equals king, but what kind of king? And this should be able to, clarify for people, what he came to be and what he didn't come to do, and clarify it. It's funny too, because I was thinking about this, that Jesus we kind of joked about Jesus being ambiguous, not as ambiguous as Bigfoot, but still kind of ambiguous. He really kind of was. He didn't go around with a huge sign and screaming from the rooftops, hey, I'm the Messiah. I am him. I am him. He never really did that. Mm-hmm. He always responded if people asked him. And there's only a couple times where people really asked him if he was or not. The woman at the well said, hey, supposedly a Messiah is coming too. And he's like, well, actually, I'm him. He didn't lead with that. Hey, how you doing? I'm Jesus, the Messiah. What's your name? No, I didn't do that. It's after conversation that he kind of reluctantly. So it's kind of strange that. So even that says a lot about him.
Yes, I think that says so much about him. Mm-hmm. But I want to back up real quick, because I think it's really important to understand. I think people like Peter, right, Jesus was talking about building his ecclesia through, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think Peter already had. I mean, you just read every story about Peter, and it's like this guy. Yes, he says you are the Christ, but his definition of the Christ, right, was still not completely the definition of that Jesus had. That's why he'd always had to say, "You've heard this say, but I'm showing you a different way, the way the kingdom of God works." Because I think the question is why would Peter think that? How could Peter think he was wrong if he was steeped in Jewish culture, and the Jewish culture had a particular view of what the Christ was supposed to be? And then Jesus says, no, this actually is not how the kingdom of God works. I'm showing you right now how the kingdom of God works. Right. But then we do this today. Well, you just said, right? How do we think Jesus is this person or this claim, when reality, no, if you just look at the text, right, he's not claiming those things. He's claiming a certain way. So I think now, people think this how could we get it so wrong today of our own personal ideas of Jesus? It's because we're not looking at who Jesus was claiming to be this whole time.
Yes. Yeah. You know what the number one problem that the ecclesia leaders in the first 100 years, I'm going to say 100 years, after Jesus' death, around 33, AD or whatever, so in the first 70 years, at the very least, you know what the number one problem was for these leaders that they had to address all the time?
Being a Jew? I don't know.
False teachers.
Oh, right.
False teachers was the big thing over and over and over. So within the first 70 years, there were actually commentaries that were written for Jewish people about the Old Testament, during Jesus' time, because a lot of even Jews couldn't quite get it.
Oh, wow.
So because they were in a different culture, they weren't, I mean, they're Jews, but they weren't Hebrew Jews, right?
Yes.
So they were, a couple thousand years removed. And they're also, so they're speaking Greek, they're speaking Aramaic, and they have to speak Hebrew as well a little bit. So they had commentaries to help them out with that. So for Christianity started having commentaries like pretty early on as well, because of this exact thing we're talking about. Because if Jesus is trying like crazy, and he did, to get his own disciples to finally figure it out, which you would think that after 3 years with him, they would. But this is, so that question that he asked him at Caesarea Philippi is chapter 16. We know he's got one more chapter before he dies. And then another chapter after that before he, sorry. He's got 10 more chapters. Sorry. Before this all happens. But you're thinking to yourself, okay, they've probably known him for a couple of years now. This is after he sent them out. Surely they know him, but even at Jesus's arrest, you talk about Peter, he still doesn't get it.
Yes.
So, cause like the big question is like, why in the world would Peter have a sword on him?
Right.
If he thought Jesus was not that kind of king,
right,
and that what Jesus was coming to do did not eventually result in violence, why would he have a sword?
Right.
So I'm sure Jesus probably is, and he does say, put away your sword. What are you doing? Which is probably shorthand for like, good grief, you idiot.
Yeah.
Have you not learned anything? Yeah. Really?
Yeah. Because even before that, right, is the Last Supper, and Jesus is talking about dying, and Peter's like, "No, not on my watch, Jesus.
Right.
I know what you're talking about, but we're not doing that."
Yeah, this is quit talking like that, because it's not what kings do. So if Jesus had that problem while he was there, he's absolutely going to have that problem when he's not.
Yes.
And it did happen. I mean, all you got to do is like read 1 Corinthians, honestly,
right,
and you realize that this little house gathering of Christians in Corinth that Paul created were already had jumped off the rails pretty quickly. So this is the idea of reality or rethinking theology really should happen on a daily basis, because you're right. This happens so easily, because Jesus can't just walk in the door and correct someone and go,
yes.
hey, hang on a minute here. I did die for your sins, but, I'm also requiring you to do some stuff here. You can't just, correct everybody. It's not like, playing the taboo game. He's got a little buzzer. Nope.
Yeah. Yes.
I wish he was, but he's not. So that's why this podcast exists.
Well, even to your point before of Jesus didn't just come out with all these claims immediately. It was almost like, why is he hiding it? But I don't think he was hiding it, right? It was more of because he created humans, he knows humans more than anyone else. The idea of it's practicing presence and the discovery of Jesus, who really is, right? It isn't just if you just know this, if I just tell it to you and just repeat it to yourself, it'll stick. No, that's what he didn't practice. What he practiced was he was with people and he corrected people, but he also was always pointing to what he was actually about, but in a way that he knew people wouldn't understand right away, right? In a way that that was he was just there with them and forgiving, merciful, full of grace. The idea is that though people, he knows we say this all the time at Impact, it's part of the discovery process, right? Let people realize, oh wait, this is something that is greater than what my needs used to be.
Yeah.
Right? This is something more than I ever wanted before.
Yeah, I think, the reason why is because God, he's not a fly by the seat of his pants guy. Yeah. He's a plan guy and a strategy guy. And he makes a plan and he sticks to it.
Yes. God of order.
And he knows that, it doesn't take 5 minutes to bake a cake. It takes 50 minutes to bake a cake or whatever. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and there's ingredients and there's specific steps, and Jesus, you see him all the time, holding back a lot. I mean, he'd heal someone and the first thing he would tell them is don't go tell anybody. Yeah. because, I mean, he even fought with his mom at the whole water and wine thing, right? It's like, it's not my time.
Yeah.
And she's like, yes, it is.
Yeah.
So, I think for Jesus, like what you said earlier, Chris, is like, I think is really a key thing to not get like freaked out because Jesus didn't go around proclaiming, because some people could probably walk away
Yes.
and go like, okay, well, wait a minute. He was ambiguous about that. So
Yes.
then
Yeah.
was he
Right.
Christ then? He claimed it. And we talked about that, I think last time, about him, Jesus saying, I have been ordained.
Mhm.
I was ordained by the Spirit. But he didn't go around. But don't let that make you go, okay, well, you have to start to, sprout doubts
Mhm.
about him being that. But because I think that what you're saying is like one of the key elements of this is understanding what people thought a king should be
Yes.
and should
Yes.
do.
Yes.
And specifically, this is a little, you guys know this is like one of my, pet peeves is the word salvation. I really believe that Jesus used the word salvation tongue in cheek,
Mm.
because all through, like if you read the Psalms, you will quickly find David begging over and over and over, come and save me, come and rescue me, come and help me, defeat my enemies. I'm like, he was pretty much having a hard time, but primarily because he was on the run. He was fear for his life. Saul was trying to find him, trying to kill him. Cool, granted, I give him that much. But his request from God isn't like, come and save the inner me, like my whole me. It saved me from this situation. And God actually did protect him from that. But he didn't like elevate him to king. He didn't just like overnight go, okay, here's what we're going to do. Saul, you're dead. Boom. David, you're king. Boom. No, he didn't do that. He took a long time, and it formed David into the kind of man that was after God's heart. And so therefore Jesus does the exact same thing with being that type of king that understands that, our tendency, as we said, is to make God into our own image and
Yes.
to meet our needs.
Yeah.
And if God was just a genie in a lamp and granting wishes, then we would have those things and we would think that that's what salvation is.
Yeah.
He's going to save me from whatever,
Yeah.
and Jesus goes, yeah, sure. Yeah. I came to save, but not in the way you think.
Yeah.
I came to be king,
Yeah.
but not in the way you think. And so therefore, why would he go and proclaim, I'm the Messiah? Everybody be like, sweet. And then at that point, no one would ever really listen to his message because they already think he's that guy. But he kind of backwards did. He kind of like, he did the important stuff first and lived it. And then, that's why probably people struggled with him, thinking of him as the Messiah, because they knew him as what he actually did and what he was. But, I think it's interesting, not letting that really rule the day as far as you thinking whether he was actually the Messiah or not. And ultimately the bottom line is that we can say without a shadow of a doubt, and anybody listening to this can go and read. They can go see Jesus's words and read his words for themselves. And this was his claim. This is what he came to do. This was what he was all about. There are a lot of things he was all about. We had joked about him he's the guy for the unjust, right? He's gonna go and bring justice. Sure. But all these little things we could say are just small characteristics of the bigger picture of if the question is, what did he come to do? What's he all about? He really did fit the idea of Messiah in a very, very different way. In a very different way that God had intended all along. Well, that's all for today. Understanding what kind of Messiah Jesus intended to be is a bit of a deep subject, and it takes, at the very least, 2 episodes to breach. So we just want to say thanks for listening and for finding this podcast. Also, we would greatly appreciate it if you would rate and review this podcast, because it would really help this conversation get out to more people and possibly even help someone who is struggling to deconstruct all of this. For my co-hosts, Chris and Tyler, we say thanks, and we'll see you next time.